Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this event today as part of DC Pro Bono Week 2022. This is Access to Justice in Family Court. Everyone deserves a lawyer. So thank you again for being here today. Ultimately, access to justice consists of the ability of individuals to seek and obtain a remedy through informal or formal institutions of justice for grievances. And as we are here today to talk about a spectrum of need in legal services for matters impacting families, there is a variety of work in this field. But what is a constant is the need for representation. And ultimately, access to justice in family law means everyone gets a lawyer. The system works better, it works best when everyone is represented. And so you're going to hear what that looks like across our different organizations and practice areas today. So I'm Jen Masi, I'm from Children's Law Center. We fight so each child in DC can grow up with a stable family, good health, and a quality education. I lead our external volunteer program with pro bono volunteers handling a variety of matters concerning children. I also lead our in-house domestic relations practice and will be speaking more today about that area of work, representing lots of relatives and other third-party caregivers, caring for children, as well as serving as best interest guardian ad litem attorneys in contested custody disputes. I want to hand it over now to my colleague Jenadee to talk about her work.
Hi, I'm Jenadee Nanini. I'm a family law attorney at the DC Bar Pro Bono Center. And the DC Bar Pro Bono Center is a separate nonprofit that really works to transform lives and provide access to justice to individuals, nonprofits, small businesses trying to support people that are living in lower income areas. We do this through mobilizing, training, and organizing volunteers, but also through direct services with our staff. I run our family law group and our immigration clinic, but most specifically, I run the Family Law Assistance Network, which is a collaboration among the DC Affordable Law Firm, the DC Bar Pro Bono Center, and Legal Aid. And I run that for the Pro Bono Center. Each organization has their own respective leader. And that's really a program we created rather, to provide immediate, free, unbundled legal services in family courts. So I'm here today to talk about the clients we serve and some of the myths we encounter when in placing pro bono cases.
And I think I'm up next. Good afternoon. My name is Melody Webb. I'm so happy to be here and so pleased that this panel is taking place. Thank you for coming today. I am the Executive Director of Mothers Outreach Network, which is a nonprofit advocacy organization with a legal services program that advances the inclusion and empowerment of Black moms in the struggle for family preservation by transforming government income and child welfare laws, policies, and practices from punitive to empowering. And we do our work through organizing, policy advocacy, and what you're here today to learn about, community lawyering. I head also the DC Guaranteed Income Coalition, which is a cross-section of residents, workers, and nonprofit organizations and cash transfer programs that want to create an income floor as a means to fight poverty. And before this, I practiced in several subject areas in several policy council, direct representation roles at local and national organizations. Most recent and relevant to this discussion today, I was a parents defense attorney and represented indigent DC parents through the Council for Child Abuse and Neglect at the DC Superior Court for about 8 years as a solo practitioner, and also served on the Superior Court's Court Improvement Advisory Committee. I also have put together sort of our strategies for addressing child welfare, including through legal solutions and a paper, Guaranteed Income to End the Child Welfare System.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keeshea Roberts. I am an assistant professor at Delaware Law with my expertise in family law as well as civil procedure and poverty law. Prior to having my hat on as a professor, I worked at an organization called Rising for Justice, formerly known as DC Law Students in Court. And while working for Rising for Justice, I had the pleasure of piloting, creating a specific program called the Civil Protective Order Project. And in that project, in that program, we provide exclusive representation for respondents in civil procedure matters, in civil matters only, ranging from mediation, representation, advice and counsel, and the like. and also prior to that, I also was worked at Neighborhood Legal Services Program as the chair of the family law section. Thank you. Okay, so now we're gonna segue into the homework assignment that everyone has. Can I get a sense of in the chat who has actually did the spent exercise? Well, the spent exercise is a great exercise for students, for even practitioners to take. It really gives an opportunity for you to put yourself into the position and the place of your client and deal with some of the struggles that he or she may face as they try to provide for their families. And so I'm going to share my screen. And we're gonna get it here. Okay, so I want you to imagine, think of yourselves as that now you're unemployed, your savings is gone, you lost your home, you're a single parent, and you're down to your last $1,000. Your last $1,000 dollars. Could you make it through the month? So can I get a sense of how many of individuals have actually made it through the month, 3 days? On $1,000? Can I get a sense? Anyone? Okay, so let's discuss some of the challenges potentially that an individual or mother or father will have to face within that month. Some decisions that people would have to make. Did any one of you have to figure out what job you had to choose and why you chose that certain job? Some jobs have benefits, some jobs have more of a regular schedule that will allow parents with children to be able to take care of their children as well as to work. However, some of those jobs have little to no benefits, such as leave or sick leave. Some of them are seasonal or temporary in nature. So these are some of the considerations that when a person wants to take a job, this is some of the things they will actually think about before they actually select the job. What about place to live? You know, it's easy. This is maybe a simple thing for most of us, but it's really something that a lot of our clients have to consider. I have to consider, you know, do I have a car? Is there public transportation? You know, in DC, we have an abysmal transportation system. And so it's very difficult for our clients to get to and from work in a reasonable time matter, as well as reasonable costs. So a lot of our clients think about, you know, where to leave and how to factor that into their own personal budget. My favorite part of this exercise is spending in going grocery shopping and spending money. This is something that a lot of our clients, and you will see a lot of our clients, really think carefully about how to spend money, how much they need to spend. Some have limited budgets on money. And so a lot of our clients take really good pains and thought process and thinking about purchasing their food. Some clients have some budgets in mind. Some items that are bought are not necessarily the healthiest items, right? Like oodles and noodles or ramen noodles that, you know, a lot of us survived off of in college, it's not necessarily nutritious, right? And so those types of food tend to be more affordable. If you actually done the exercise, you can get a pack of noodles, for instance, for $1, right? And so that may be sufficient to feed a family of 4 for a week or 2, right? And so a lot of the items, unfortunately, that are available for our families to purchase are not necessarily, as I said before, the most healthiest thing for them to buy. Also, with regards to whether or not you can afford food, period, there's a program called food stamps or TANF now, and those benefits allow our clients to actually be able to afford food, to pay for their food. However, the types of food is limited in what they can buy. The amount of monies that they get each month is very limited. And so you still have families, our clients, really thinking about truly, how much money am I going to spend? And that money has to last them the month, right? Usually these monies are just for the month. And so you have a lot of families really thinking about how to spend their money. Family pressures, we, are fortunate in that if we need to talk to therapists, we can usually go afford to get a therapist. These are some things that, our clients may suffer from. They may have depression. They may suffer from a heart murmur. They may have other health concerns, but they're unable to afford to talk to a therapist or a doctor. Even with Obamacare or some type of healthcare, it's still very challenging for them to actually access those resources, as well as, quite frankly, the stigma behind accessing these resources as well, and also taking the time off of work in order to go to the therapist or go to get a prescription for antidepressants. A lot of our clients really think about that, whether or not it's worth using or wasting time and money in order to do those things, even though they would be beneficial for our client to do. What about taking care of a sick relatives? I know as I go older, we have a lot of clients who, and myself included, are dealing with parents who are of a certain age, who live in the home or who doesn't live with the home. With that also comes responsibility, especially in a majority of our clients are extended families. They live together. They really have close bonds, relationships with the extended family, and things like this does come up. Sometimes our client have to choose between assisting that relative who really needs assistance, or unfortunately saying no, right? And so those are things that our client base have to decide as well. What if you have a minor car accident, for instance? Or do you have to, a lot of our clients don't have money to pay for the damages. A lot of our clients don't have money to pay for fines, such as if you run a speed light or if you park in a zone that requires you to pay. A lot of our clients don't have a lot of money for that. And so they may risk the penalties of driving away, or basically hit and run, or driving away from an accident, or not paying that fine because the money needs to be spent elsewhere, such as providing food or providing clothes for your children. And so a lot of our clients also think about those things when they come up. Playing a lottery, for instance. I know that some people may have seen this type of, when you were playing this exercise, you may have been able to participate in a lottery pool. It may seem silly to us that, this is like a waste of money, but, from our client's perspective, this could be a source of income that, it may or may not happen, but, this is something that, that a lot of our clients really rely on or look upon as possible monies. And so to wrap up, these are some of the, these are some of the issues that our client has to come up with. This is, again, a great exercise. I encourage you to, if you can participate, if you can do this, this presentation is greatly, it really enlightens you about the things that your client will have to endure or could endure. And then with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jen.
Thank you, Keeshea, so much for walking us through that. So we did want to start with this exercise just as a baseline understanding, thinking about the clients that we're serving, different roles and different types of matters impacting families. We're serving a similar population in terms of individuals and families who are low or no income, living in the district, facing the tough decisions on a daily basis that exercise highlights. Wanted to go ahead and give just 30 seconds for you to pop in the chat. What are some things that come to mind after taking into consideration, what Keeshea just walked us through, some of the barriers that you think might apply to clients securing representation in matters concerning child custody, domestic violence, child abuse and neglect investigations? What are some barriers that you think may arise in clients securing representation? If you can just drop some ideas in the chat, I'll give about 30 seconds for people to think and drop some things in. Seeing a few things listed. Part of it might be in addition to the financial barriers, the time, the cost in time, mental health, access to different platforms just to engage with a lawyer, fear of interacting with the legal system, distrust of lawyers, navigating the system. Those are all great examples. And so we're thinking about those hard choices. We're thinking about clients facing scarcity, having to make really tough decisions across multiple priorities in their lives. And so we are serving clients living in poverty, often with trauma, the impacts of systemic racism. We're thinking about the difficulties of navigating the legal system, working with lawyers. All of those things show up across the different practice areas that we're here to talk about today. I want to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing at Children's Law Center and then hand it off to my colleagues to discuss their practice areas. And we're going to just walk through the clients we're representing and really what does this idea of access to justice look like? Why does it matter so much? Why does everyone deserve a lawyer in order to get really good outcomes for kids and families? And so in our work, I mentioned at the outset that we represent third-party caregivers. We represent a lot of relatives when parents are unable to care for their child or children. And we serve as guardian ad litem best interest attorneys in contested child custody disputes. So the court reaches out to us and says, we need someone to advocate and represent the best interests of the child in the dispute. Some of the recent statistics on representation in family court at DC Superior Court is that 83 to 93% of litigants go unrepresented. And so this results in big challenges for judges to get the relevant information that they need to make critical decisions concerning a child's life and care. We're talking about families. You know, this week's DC, this year's Pro Bono Week theme, it broadly is law in everyday life. And it doesn't get much more than everyday life than your family, who a child is engaging with, living with, who's making decisions about their care, their life. And so we see in these cases instances where parties are not represented. We may be serving our role representing a caregiver, but we're having to stay within that role, representing and advocating for our clients' goals. If we're representing the best interests of a child, we're still within our role. We're working with pro se parties. We have to make sure we're not holding ourselves out in any way where a pro se parent in a custody case, for example, thinks that we're their lawyer because we're the only lawyer on the case. We do our best to investigate thoughtfully. We need pro bono attorneys in both of these cases to be able to advocate for clients, help third parties move through the legal system. It can definitely trip you up. Just being able to serve other parties in the case can stall you from getting an outcome. And when you're the guardian ad litem, we are investigating to get a sense of what is life outside of the courtroom, outside of these 20-minute sometimes hearings where high emotions are running in the courtroom and parties are trying to advocate for themselves as best as possible. And so there's really meaningful work to be done. And we need pro bono attorneys to assist us in these areas of work, but it's not enough to just have the grandparent represented in the case or the child's best interest represented in the case. The reality is that there are lots of allegations in these types of cases and child custody disputes in particular. Allegations are not facts. We all hold implicit biases. And so we're constantly making sense of information based on our experiences. We're making judgment calls, credibility assessments, and we have to check ourselves. We have to check our assumptions. We have to constantly pause and really practice cultural humility, client-centered lawyering, all of these things. And so we should be doing that in our individual roles, but there's a real deficit to the process when you only have some parties represented or some interests represented. And so there's limited time. Court dockets are heavy and full. Judges are doing what they can to move through them. There's a lot of limited information that's coming out in a limited amount of time. And ultimately, when all parties in a custody case are represented, then you're going to have a greater chance of being able to have all parties accessing the system, getting before the court their interests, what's really relevant to making the decision. And we think about cultural humility and we think about custody disputes in the courthouse. We hope that there's going to be an order at the end of the day that's really best for that child and that family. It's not about what I think for any particular family. It's not about studies I've read or best practices I know about. It's really about each individual child and their circumstances, or my client and their family. So we have to think about what's really going to work for the families, and lawyers can be game changers in terms of working with parties, getting a better sense of the full dynamics, moving beyond the allegations that are thrown back and forth in a hearing, and offering, a lot of value to streamlining disputes and ultimately ending up with what we hope would be a legal order that's going to be lasting, and endure, and not bring parties back to conflict, back to the court system. And so with that being said, I want to be able to turn it over to Jenadee, who's going to talk. We again all are kind of working with different clients and similar but different issues sometimes. And so I want to pass it over now for Jenadee to talk about the work that they're doing at the DC Bar Pro Bono Center.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I second everything Jen said about who our clients are and why they need representation. And I want to echo again and again, every child and every family is completely different. And everybody who is involved in this case and this family's decision needs to have representation. That's how the family truly gets justice all around, and that the child has a safe and stable home, regardless if it's with a third party, both parents, one parent, etc. So at the DC Bar Pro Bono Center, we do serve parents in custody cases. We also serve third parties. So we don't do the guardian ad litem work, but we do serve the parents and the third parties. And through the Family Law Assistance Network, we also serve those same litigants. And it's striking, the stat Jen gave, 83 to 93% of people in family court just don't have representation. So that's a huge mass of people that aren't making informed decisions or aren't having an advocate for their family and their life, which can create generational trauma and lived experiences that might be positive or negative for the child in the future. I mean, the reality is that the litigants were serving in DC, over 110,000 people live under the poverty line. 25% of children live in poverty. I mean, it is a vast range of people that are just victims of failing systems all around them. The criminal justice system, the education system, the healthcare system, cyclical trauma, cyclical abuse, and domestic violence. And it's not all pretty. But the fact is, everyone deserves access to justice, and that's what we're here for. That's what your pro bono heart is here for. And so sometimes you're going to get the client. I get a lot of clients who aren't what you would call maybe the perfect client. No client is. You might have the parent that is accused of domestic violence. You might have the parent who is accused of abuse or neglect. Might have a parent who's been absent because of mental health, substance abuse, or maybe incarceration. That does not make them a bad parent. And that does not mean that they should have some involvement in their child's life. And that does not mean absolutely that they don't deserve a lawyer. Everyone deserves a lawyer so that the system works, so that everyone has access, and so that the family and the child's own individual experience is honored, and that is protected, and the best plan moving forward is made. If you have a parent who is incarcerated and doesn't have an advocate, or you have a parent who has a CPO against them and the other party's represented, and I mean, it's the judge and the other party against that person basically, and they're starting from down here. Sometimes those allegations are founded, sometimes they're not, but that's not our place. I think sometimes we make, because of implicit bias or because what we think of what a nuclear family is or what our lived experience is, we put a value judgment on some things. And our job is to really come in and provide access to justice and not put a value judgment on that. And so a lot of times, we do get fathers. A lot of fathers do not get representation in the court, which is horrible. A lot of people who are accused of domestic violence or maybe have had an incident in the past of throwing someone's cell phone and got a CPO against them are then just written off for the rest of their child's life. And that's not helpful to anyone, especially the child. And, we get a lot of people who, just don't have a safety net. The reality is they don't have a safety net. So they're making decisions that maybe we don't have to make, right? Maybe they are, stealing something. Maybe they are getting in an altercation with somebody. Maybe they're missing appointments because of lack of public transportation, etc. That doesn't mean they're a bad parent, and that doesn't mean they don't need a lawyer. So it's really important, like Jen said, to practice that culture of humility and not place a value judgment on who your clients or potential clients are but really step back and think, what are my values? Why am I doing this work? And why does everyone need access to the court? And what is the greatest good for that? So with that, I will pass it on to Keeshea to talk about her work.
Right, thank you, Genevieve and Jen. I echo what my colleagues have said. Sorry to sound like a broken record, but this is really, really important, guys. These people, these hardworking men and women and children, they really need your assistance and your help in making their families whole again. Or giving them tools by which, if their family is not going to be whole again, give them tools by which to go forward and to be involved in their lives, in each other's lives, and to in the like. I'm going to talk briefly about some type of client that I would consider to be unpopular, and my client is basically respondents or defendants in civil protective order cases. When I was at Rising for Justice, we had a project, and in that project, we, again, as I said before, we only represented respondents in civil protective order cases, or called CPO cases. 95% of petitioners and about the same amount of respondents are without counsel. And these cases, for respondent anyway, they have civil implications, but also criminal implications if they fail to comply with that order. And what I mean by that is, if an order is entered and the respondent fails to comply with that order, potentially other criminal things can come about, such as a violation of the CPO, or some type of program that a respondent has to participate in, and failure to participate in that program will result in a finding against that, either a civil finding or a criminal finding against that respondent. So these type of orders, not only with regards to safety is so critical, but also for the future of that family, because once a CPO, unfortunately, once a CPO order is entered, it kind of follows that family, it follows that person, right? And that's when we get into the, as my colleagues stated before, that's when we get into the biases that continue on, that follow these individuals and these families in these cases going forward. These individuals, what I used to tell my students is suspend your bias, suspend your prejudices with regards to that. I look at these cases as similar to criminal cases. Everyone deserves a lawyer in that sense, and I will treat these cases as such and litigate them as such. Going back to Rising for Justice, the majority of the work we did, quite frankly, was education, right? You know, what options does a respondent have? What are the pros and cons of those options? For instance, if a person has a CPO entered against them and they have a firearm, they're not allowed to have that firearm anymore for a significant period of time. If you are a security guard and you have a sidearm and you're required to have a sidearm, your employment may be in jeopardy, right? If you can't get a transfer. Or if you are on probation for another offense and CPO petition was filed against you, potentially your probation on the other offense has nothing to do with this one, but the other offense, you may be show cause. It may cause you issues with your probation that you're on. But people don't realize those type of things that are happening. All they have and all they receive is a piece of paper to come to court, right? And a lot of people didn't understand what are the repercussions, because they are serious repercussions for entering these orders. Another thing that I did while I was at Rising for Justice is do a lot of mediation, help carve or help the parties to come up with an agreement that they can live with. The idea is for them to be able to live with the agreement, meaning that they can comply with all the terms that are in the order. Thus the parties are safe, the children are safe, and the person can get the help or assistance that he needs and can be able to comply with the order. Again, one of the myths, and this is the last thing, one of the myths that respondents that they all are men and petitioners all are women. That's not the case. You'd be surprised. Or they're all have dating relationships. I've had brother, sister, mother, father, uncle, niece, cousin to cousin. It comes in all different forms. This issue is a public health issue, quite frankly. And that, again, this type of work is sorely needed, and they need all the assistance they can get. And now I'll pass it to Melody.
Thank you, thank you. And as you all can guess, I'm going to echo what all of my colleagues who've come before me have said. But first, I want to kind of set the context for my comments by talking to you a little bit about what our organization does. But again, with the goal of my fellow panelists to ensure that you make sure that you, in selecting pro bono activities, help us guarantee that all family members have access to representation. So in terms of context, I'll tell you about how and where I meet my clients. Our work is focused around parents with children who are child welfare system involved. You all may know it as foster care, which is an actual phase of an involvement. But there are several events that happen before a child ends up in foster care. And that's before the petition for removal that occurs. And these phases before that point are critical for legal intervention from the perspective of our organization and a growing number of organizations around the country. And however, parents don't have a right to counsel prior to petition for removal, which means that access to representation is, totally, based on their ability to seek out counsel, to find counsel. And our practice seeks to try to fill that gap. It's enormous. So we're trying to work with pro bono bar and with also fellow practitioners in the legal services community. So my clients might encounter me at, like I said, a very early phase of their situation during what some people call pre-petition or prevention stage. That could be during an investigation for neglect or abuse. It could be after an adverse finding from an investigation by the city's agency responsible for this work. It could be, again, during the stage prior to a petition, but while a case is open, following an investigative finding, a substantiated finding. In terms of our services, we seek to help secure housing to mitigate that as a basis for removal. And we aid parents in appeals of child protection register placement, which, just to emphasize, they're in a database for substantiated finding, then that is a permanent placement. And so, again, our work kind of comes in before a petition for removal or after disposition at the administrative level. Again, as distinguished from my past practice as, parents counsel, where I represented parents during a removal where there was, a reunification process in place. We don't do that work. But, we do want to, our work is centered around preventing cases from advancing to that point. And so with that background, and, just want to say that as we learned today, poverty is ubiquitous. Jenadee mentioned some statistics against the backdrop of what Keeshea had already stated, and you all already know as well-informed citizens of this region. And, it is our supposition that poverty is a driver of families being involved in this system. And, making the worst consequence of poverty, in our perspective, family instability. And so I want to talk about two types of myths that I think, might interfere with, us getting representation for these clients who desperately need it. I call them sort of person-centered, and Jenadee and Keeshea have kind of talked about this a little bit. Questions you might ask, for example, about my clients are, but haven't the majority of my clients committed unspeakable criminal acts of abuse against their children? And you might think, and this could lead you to reject opportunities to assist parents. And, you might think, well, the government only charges or gets families involved for the worst kinds of situations, right? And it's not really safe to be around these clients, or they deserve punishment, or, won't these parents get into trouble again? And the truth is that, in our jurisdiction, as in many, neglect has some poverty factors, and its definition by statute in DC includes harming the health or welfare of a child, and failing to accord them adequate food, clothing, shelter, education, or medical care. So I won't go into all the details, but in terms of just thinking about like the breadth of cases that you might encounter, that we are actually encountering. Keeshea was at NLSP. I was there for a period. There's prevention work you can do in helping parents who have precarious housing. And, again, a huge percentage of cases in that system involve neglect versus physical and sexual abuse, and 12% involve housing insecurity. And so, public benefits work, housing work, those kinds of things. And then finally, circumstance-based myths is how I would categorize the others. Poverty gets confused with neglect, and there's a whole body of literature about this. And again, the vast majority of the families are experiencing poverty, which we've heard a lot about today. And sometimes, behaviors or circumstances could make one think that parents are neglectful. And again, unfortunately, poverty factors themselves can lead to identification. So, again, we just, want to highlight that, there are circumstances that lead parents into this system that you might be surprised about. I've had clients who had, didn't have running water and, came to the attention of the agency because they had a medically fragile child. So, parents whose children are facing, have truancy-based allegations because the school system isn't providing those children with the educational services they might need. So I'll wrap up with this and just say that the situations are complex, the individuals are complex, and many of them, because of their situations of poverty, are vulnerable and get identified by the system. And the good news is that you can be a part of assisting those families in staying together.
Thank you, Melody, Keeshea, Jenadee, and thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. There are a lot of myths, just kind of going off of what Melody was just saying, and it's just something that we talk a lot about in this practice area, the value of checking assumptions and slowing down and pausing, so if you're hearing something, why do I think that? Why am I sort of making this judgment call? And not beating yourself up if you do, but just taking the time to pause and check yourself. And so please know that we have opportunities across all of these areas of work that we want to be able to talk with you about now, how you can get involved. One of the common myths about family law generally is that it's never ending and it's messy and it's all of these things. And yes, I'm going to be transparent with you. It's not a Saturday clinic. It's not a 9 to 12 situation on one day. It is beyond that. So at Children's Law Center, our cases are, full representation, direct representation matters. And it is typically going to be a year-long commitment. It may be longer or shorter in some instances. I'm always happy to chat with folks about what might be a good fit, give you my best predictors of the future, though I have no crystal ball. But it is really getting into the case and representing a client, the best interests of a client. And the way that you can learn more about our opportunities is join our listserv, where we send out available cases each week. We have on-demand training materials. We have staff expert mentors who are there to guide you along the way, help you checking with those assumptions, questions that you have, doing this work in a meaningful way to get good outcomes for clients. And we certainly, like I said, can find a good fit and dialogue back with each other if you're interested. So we'll send out contact information after today's session so that you know how to reach all of us. But I want to turn it over next to Jenadee to talk about how you can get involved at DC Bar Pro Bono Center.
Yes, thank you. So we have our Advocacy and Justice Clinic, which does place a range of cases, housing, Social Security, but I'm here to talk about family law for full representation. But we also, through my work with the Family Law Assistance Network, realized a lot of people could just use representation pro bono for limited scope. So we now place full representation and limited scope. So again, I'm happy to chat with anyone about the case placement, and similar to Jen, I can't predict where any case in litigation will ever go, but I can give you my best prediction. But we have a lot of just for mediation, maybe just for discovery, maybe just a motion to modify, or maybe it's a whole case. So there's a range of opportunities for you to get involved. We'll send out a flyer after with our volunteer questionnaire, and then my colleague Adrian, who you can contact, who runs that clinic as well. And you're more than welcome to also contact me directly. I'll drop my information in the chat. But I do want to part you with this. I want to challenge you to go outside your comfort zone. I know it's so easy. I used to volunteer. My old job, I used to volunteer at Children's Law Center all the time. It's so easy to take the case that's like the feel-good story, right? Like, oh, this parent who's been victimized by this and needs their kid back, whatever. Those are very important, but also stop and challenge yourself. Maybe the parent who just got released and is helping, needs help with reentry and getting access to their child back. Maybe the parent who does have a CPO, but it was 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and now they need to reestablish a relationship with their child, or have lost access to their child because of a false allegation or a founded allegation, whatever. But I want to challenge you to look at that case list differently and be willing to go outside your comfort zone in bigger, small ways, limited scope or full rep. And with any organization, all of these organizations on the call are great. There's many more out there as well. But the goal is that every parent and every person in the case has an attorney, so that the child can have a safe and stable future. And with that, I will pass it to Melody.
Okay, I wasn't prepared. So sorry about that. So as Jenadee mentioned, we also have brief advice, brief services, extended representation opportunities, and we hope soon even sort of systemic or impact opportunities. And again, our goal is to create opportunities to reimagine policies, practices, systems, and then there's, sort of lots of room for us because our legal program is somewhat new to help us kind of structure and grow our pro bono, cadre of pro bono attorneys. We're looking for partnerships. I'm on the panel with some colleagues who've got like really impressive and large, very highly structured programs, and we aspire to be where they are. So I'll give you some examples. In our practice area, we have a low-income tax credit clinic that came about as a result of the Child Tax Credit 2021. And we've been really having, just been a great opportunity for us to do Know Your Rights training. Of course, there's some really easy tools for people to claim that child tax credit, but we've had attorneys who've been available to answer questions or deal with like sticky situations for parents who just are new to filing. And again, the opportunity to deliver information through workshops has been really satisfying. And then, we're in the process of setting up a brief advice clinic for our child welfare related program that I described previously, and have opportunities for people to represent parents in child protection register appeals. I described a little bit earlier, some of the circumstances that lead people to have meritorious, appellate cases, and we've had some victories. And that is, some of it is really the first stage of the appeal is a mediation, a conversation with the agency. So I think, they're very somewhat self-contained. And then, we're just, still developing, but we are really committed to weekly advice clinics, particularly around the child tax credit and other earned income tax credits, which in DC will become more generous over the next 2 years. We believe in a year-round tax advising system, particularly for low income and no income people who are very unfamiliar with and wary of the tax system. So that's just sort of some smattering of what we have available. I'm happy for you to reach out to me at volunteer at Mothers Outreach, or look at our website and get more information, and I'll try to put something together for circulation after this session. But thank you for the opportunity.
Hi, last but least, Rising for Justice, they are always looking for people to assist in a variety of different hats, with advice and counsel, with mediation, and particularly and especially representation. They are looking for those individuals. If you want an opportunity to do some research, do good work, to make novel arguments, to really make a difference and contribute to society, this is the type of opportunity for you. And you can contact Rising for Justice at CPOP, or the Civil Protective Order Project, directly, and I'm sure they will appreciate all of your assistance, your help, your monies, your any help with policy issues, your rights issues, and the like. Thank you.
Thank you, Keeshea. Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm going to stop the recording so that our question and answer is not recorded. So thank you so much again, everyone.